I thank you all for coming and for taking an interest. We are the Gower Initiative for Modern Money Studies, and we launched last October. And we are passionate about seeking solutions to the climate crisis and bringing about social justice. When left-wing progressives talk about delivering a Green New Deal or public services, the first question that people ask is, how are you going to pay for it? GIMMS was formed with that specific objective of answering that question. How, by a better understanding of how money works, we can deal with the climate crisis, provide essential public services, and tackle poverty and inequality. So, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Phil Armstrong, a teacher of economics for 38 years, who's going to answer those questions for you.
Hi, thanks for coming. I hope you can hear me. Does anyone know anything about MMT? You've come across it? If you can put your hand up.
Sorry, anybody?
Come across MMT? Modern monetary theory. Have you heard of it? No. It's only because obviously I'll take the discussion from the angle that you're not familiar with it. If you have technical questions, you know, about the central bank and things, it's probably best to see me after the talk, because other people will wonder what's going on. So any technical questions, I'm very, very keen to answer those. But if you see me at the end of the talk, general questions at the end of the talk. So my aim is to talk for about 40 minutes, something like that. And then I'll take questions at the end. So that's my sort of approach to it. First of all, just to introduce myself a little bit further, after Prue's introduction. I've taught for 38 years. I'm now doing a PhD in old age, if you like, or late middle age, being generous, at the University of Southampton-Solent. And my focus is modern monetary theory, which is a kind of a new development in economic theory and policy. It's been going since the early 1990s. And we'll see a little bit about the insights that MMT can bring and how it helps us to understand the potential for us in the future with things like the Green New Deal and improving the lot of ordinary people in our world. This is John Kenneth Galbraith, faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving there's no need to do so. Almost everyone gets busy on the proof. So you might argue, when we looked at the financial crisis, all of the models were all proved to be inaccurate. No one saw that coming. Things that were sort of once in a lifetime event, you were getting many of them in a single week. So you would have thought that the economics establishment would have been greatly shaken and possibly even overturned. Didn't happen. So people in the establishment, in the major economic departments around the world, found proof, if you like, inverted commas, to show that their theories were in fact still true. They're just a slight omissions in them. Maybe they didn't have the right modelling structure. So they put a sticking plaster over their failed theories. There's Keynes. You can't have a talk on economics without a bit of Keynes. The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones. So this is the idea that the establishment of economics, guys who built their careers in economics, who were professors, won Nobel Prizes, they're not going to reject the if you like, kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, even if it's a pretty hopeless goose for explaining the world. So they're stuck in their old ideas. So that's the kind of background. And then if we move on, well, here are, if you like, our introduction to MMT, what founds it, what drives the GIMMS, for example. First of all, let's look at the issues. Let's be responsible. Let's think about the problems the world is facing. Now, you're all Green Party members, I guess. You're all here today at 9 o'clock in the morning. So therefore, you are giving attention to the issues, you know, so that's important. The next thing is to break away with neoliberal framing. Now, the thing is, we all think in frames, we all have ways of thinking of things. So if we get an idea, we fit that idea into the way we've already framed. All facts are theory laden if you're a philosopher. So the thing is, neoliberalism, which I'll talk a little bit about later, this idea that, generally speaking, free markets deliver all the best possible solutions, gives you a structure. And it's hard to break out of that structure. It's like getting away from the Earth's gravitational field, and you've got to break away from that. And when you can do that, you think, well, are there other ways to frame the debate? And if we do frame the debate in a different way, in a more accurate way, I might hazard to say, then we can get different answers. I was at a conference, and there was a young, quite inspiring PhD student. It was more of a standard age, you know, late 20s, career to bring, and she quoted this. This is quite a brilliant way of looking at it, I think, which is living successfully in a world of systems requires more of us than our ability to calculate. It requires our full humanity, our ability to sort truth from falsehood, our intuition, our compassion, our vision, and our morality. Now, so in other words, economics is very important, but it's with a purpose. So we study economics in order to make the world a better place. Now I went to the city, spoke to them. They didn't get that, didn't understand it, had no, what's he talking about, airy-fairy stuff. And I'm not joking, it's true, they just blanked it. I thought there would be a few nods, nothing. All right? The city adventures is another story. Now, here is the Bank of England's forecast in 2006. That's what they thought was going to happen, not being too mathematical. So in 2006, the darker the colour, the more likely it is to happen. Now, these models are very, very careful. They never give anything a zero chance. So if you can imagine, they're saying that they think that the economy in Britain is going to grow about 3%. That's where the dark green is. And being below 1, it's like a very, very low probability, in fact negligible, like being struck by lightning on the way home, type of unlikely. So that's what they say is going to happen. They're all sitting around in the Monetary Policy Committee. Bang! Whoa, where did that come from? So you can see, look where the naught is. So that's what they said. That's where we are. Whoa. Now that's not like a little mistake. This is a cataclysmic error. So you would have thought, let's close it all down. You know, in a normal job, if you built a bridge and it collapsed, you built another one, it collapsed, you built another one, it collapsed. You might get a sack, or at least they might, you know, interview you about your worries, the worries you were generating. These guys are still working, they've still got their jobs, they've still got big pensions, they're still telling us what to do. Amazing. Right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about fiscal policy. Now, there are many aspects to MMT which make it a rich and full theme. But if you like, the thing that catches people's attention is the idea of fiscal policy, because most people think they understand fiscal policy and how it works. The idea that we pay our taxes to the government, and then the government puts those taxes somewhere, we're not really sure where, some big bank account, and then it uses those taxes to buy things with that we need, like nurses and doctors and Green New Deals and stuff. And if they haven't got enough taxes, then they have to borrow the money, and we're not really sure where they borrow it from, probably foreigners, but we're not really sure. And then if they haven't got any money, we go to a giant bank in the sky called the IMF, like we did in 1976, and then that means we all have to pay really high taxes until the year dot, and it's a disastrous answer. So in other words, the normal thing is taxes fund spending. Now the big thing is taxes don't fund spending. All right, and now we'll go on to show you why that's wrong. And again, Galbraith, in economics, the majority are always wrong. So, certainly true. So in every year, I'm going to fund my, if the government says we're going to have to fund something through taxes, you know they're wrong. So you don't need to listen anymore. Change channel. All right? Watch your repeat a time team or something. Great show. 20 series. Wonderful. Now, right, like I said, okay, the government's just like us. It's just bigger. Like we're a household, we get our money, we borrow it, and then same with the government. Same deal, just on a bigger scale. And this is framing, we're hardwired into our brains, This is the way we think. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Where does the private sector, viewed as a whole, that means all of us, all of you guys, all right? I assume none of you own the government, all right? So we're all private individuals, okay? Where do we get our money from in order to pay our taxes? Now, you can shout out the answer if you want. There's no harm in being wrong, provided one is promptly found out. Sorry?
The banks created from nothing.
Banks do create money from nothing, but you can't use that to pay your taxes. So good answer, but a answer, and but not the right answer.
Wages.
Right, okay, you can pay your taxes with your wages, but where did your firm get the money from to pay your wages? Sorry?
The government.
Say that again.
The government.
Right, so would you agree that I could take the answer you gave me a little further. What was your name, sorry?
Me.
Yeah.
Chris.
Right. What Chris said was our wages. Now here's how the standard answer goes, okay? Well, I go to work and my firm pays me my wages, so I pay me taxes with that. And then you say, well, how does your firm get the money? Oh, well, they sell things. Well, how do they sell it? Oh, well, people buy their stuff, and where do people get the money from? But they get wages. It goes round in a circle, doesn't it? Agreed? It's like the plumbing in your house. The water goes round, doesn't it? Till you have a leak in it, you lose it. So how does the plumbing get into your house? How does the water get into it in the first place? From outside. And the lady here, what was your name? Sorry.
Libby.
Debbie. Sorry. Libby. Old age, not hearing. Right. As Libby said, from the government has to spend before it can tax. All right. The government has to put the money in to the system before we can do it. Otherwise, if not, we'd have to be making the money ourselves. Think about it. All right. The government only accepts money that's state money that it's created itself and put into the system. For example, technically, that's a government banknote. You use it, it's Bank of England. Technically, that you can pay your taxes with that. But if the government hadn't issued any money, would you agree? It couldn't collect it in taxes. If we paid it with our own money, it would be counterfeiting. All right, there's an old film, I think, which I often talk about, I can't remember the title, it was about an aged American couple. And they had a little machine in the loft, called it Henry. I don't know if you've ever seen that film. And whenever they got short of money, they used to go into the loft and make some dollar bills with that. All right, but they only went to Henry, this is nice, they only went to Henry when they really needed it, which meant that they got away with Henry for a long time because they weren't greedy. So they only used him in extremis. So what you've got to realise is the private sector cannot create state money. It's counterfeiting. Whoa. It's illegal. So the government has to put money into the system before it can collect in taxes. Now, a good little example of that, and I've got to watch the time. How am I doing? Give me a nod. Here's a good example. Nowadays, it's quite difficult, isn't it, to see how the monetary system works. But if you imagine, say, I was a Roman emperor, all right, unlikely, and let's say I wanted an army, okay, to go and invade Gaul. Because I was greedy, I wasn't happy with what I had in Italy, I wanted to go to Gaul. I need an army. Would you agree I've got to pay them? Now, I could have a slave army, but then again, they might rebel, and I need to pay some people to look after the slaves, all right? So I've got an army. The good news for you is, I know you probably don't want to fight, but let's say within Roman times, go with me on this, you're my army, all right? So you're going out to invade Gaul, okay? I've got to pay you. So what I do is, I pay you in things that look a bit like that. They're not perfectly round, and they've got my head on it. They don't necessarily have precious metal in fact, most of them don't. So I said, I will pay you in these for invading Gaul. All right? And you think, well, what good's that? It's just a bit of metal with your head on it. But this is the trick. This is the trick. You know I've imposed a tax liability on the villages. So the tax comes first. First job, I'm the emperor, a man of power. I impose a tax liability on the local villages throughout the empire. I say, you've got to pay me some of these discs with my head on it. Now the villagers are panicking. They haven't got any. They've not been issued yet. Do you see what I mean? So the villagers know they're going to have to pay those, but they haven't got any. Now I can pay my soldiers, would you agree, in these, and the soldiers can then go into the villages around and buy what they need. And the villagers accept them because they know that the Roman tax collectors are coming to collect them. So the idea is, okay, they will pay their taxes, and also they can, any that aren't collected in taxes, they can buy things from other people. Result. And that's how the system works. Now, would you agree, if I spent loads of these and didn't tax them back, I would have a problem. One, you guys wouldn't come fight for me anymore. So I've got enough. We'll retire. Okay? Or you'd have so many of these, when you went into the villages to buy the stuff, the villagers wouldn't sell you their stuff now because they've already got loads of those. So you get a thing called inflation. Prices go up. Agreed? If on the other hand, I didn't spend enough of these, by the time I've collected my taxes, you guys, or the villages, have got very few of them left. So there's unemployment, because there's not enough spending going on for people to make things. Now this is the trick. You're beginning to see the cloud disappear. What the government has to do, and it's the same today, it has to spend enough in the system relative to taxes to maintain full employment. So for example, if you've got inflation from excess demand, too much spending, the government needs to either spend less or tax more. All right? If you've got unemployment, it needs to spend more or tax less. So let's look at Britain today. We've got unemployment, would you agree? Short time working, 0 hours of contract. So therefore the government needs to net spend more. Agreed? Does the government's deficit position make any difference? Yes or no? No, the gentleman there shaking his head. So while this is the deal, the size of the government deficit makes no difference. It's only the results that matter. And the reason for that is the government's deficit is our surplus. It must be. A little example. Let's go back to my Roman emperor example. Say I'm going to give the Romans our unit of money. I won't talk about sesterces and denarius and stuff. All right, so say that the Roman emperor spends £100 and taxes back 90. Who's got the other 10? You guys. So all the money the government spends and doesn't take back in a year is called the deficit, and all the money the government's ever spent and not taxed back is called the national debt. You might have heard of that. And they say the national debt's bad. It's good, it's great, because it's our net saving. Now, could it ever get bad? Yes. If the national debt was so big, we were all so rich with all this money the government spent and not taxed back that we didn't do any work, that would be a problem. Are we anywhere near that? No. All right, so when Mr. Hammond says, I'm running a surplus, and we're supposed to pat him on the back, what he's really saying, I've just destroyed some of your net saving. Are we going to give him a clap? We're not. Does Mr. Hammond understand economics? No. Did George Osborne understand economics? No. All right? They don't get it. Now, you might say, well, surely they get it a bit. And they possibly do get it a bit. But it's kind of like a dangerous thing in a darkened room. They know something's not quite right. They have a suspicion. Certainly the more intelligent ones do. Not George Osborne. Yeah. Right. And so they open the door, they go, oh, I'm not going in there. So it's a combination, it's not a conspiracy theory. Politicians, by and large, don't know. They may have an inkling, but if they do, they don't go any further. They don't want to know. All right, imagine a politician standing up and telling you what I'm telling you. Right, the deficit needs to be bigger, not smaller. Yeah? Imagine the Daily Express, you know, big Britain burning, you know, bankrupt, you know, the IMF are coming, along with the Russians. Okay, so moving on, you'll see I've got ahead of my slides, and that's good because when we get to the slides, you can see the, if you like me, reiterating the points. All right, as Libby said. Because the government is not a user, it's an issuer, all right? It's not a giant household. You see what I mean? Apart from the Eurozone, and I'll talk a little bit about the Eurozone later. So in Britain then, our government's got a big spreadsheet, and he presses a button and creates more money. Now, you hear about people saying about MMT, oh, well, MMT is just about pressing money on a screen, and the more you spend, the richer you are. See, it's hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. Now, all that's just people who don't understand it. I've never said that. MMT is very aware of inflation. If you spend too much relative to your productive capacity and you lose control of your tax system, you will get inflation. It's nothing about that. There's a mantra you might have heard, the Thatcherite mantra. It's hard to say Thatcher, isn't it, without, you know, there's something there. You want to spit, but it's not polite. All right? We have to live within our means. Now, it works for a household. My dad told me that. Fought in the war, he told me that. And it works for a household. But for a nation state, you live up to your means. Do you see what I mean? Not beyond, up to your means. So, for example, if you were my population, all right, and I was the emperor, and this side of the room had no job and you wanted to contribute, I would just leave you there because of the spreadsheet. I would make sure there was sufficient demand in the economy for you all to contribute. I wouldn't keep on pressing the button long after everyone was working as much as... That would be crazy. All right? So MMT doesn't talk about keeping on pressing the button. It doesn't say that you don't face constraints. It's just about realizing what real resources you've got and making sure your net spending is correct to give everyone that opportunity to work. All right? Not leaving valuable resources idle. All right? Now you may think, yeah, but how are we going to use the resources sustainably? Being a Green Party conference, that'll be a top question. And I'll come to that a little bit later. So I'm aware of it. So, the government spends, all right, all that happens is, if the government gives you social security payment, it just presses a button and you get the money in your bank account. Result. Doesn't come from anywhere. So as we say, taxes aren't required to fund spending. A good way of thinking about it is this idea of it making room. So for example, if you tax people, you destroy their spending power, so they can buy less. So what they would have bought is now available for the state to buy to use for other purposes. So for example, I'm going to take a very abstract example. If everyone was working in the banking sector, there was no health service, imagine that, eh? That would be a dream for some city guys, all right? And the government decided, well, this is no good because people are dying, we need a health service. What you would do in that is put a tax on, which means that the private sector now haven't got enough money to spend to employ everybody in the banking sector, so all the resources are now freed up, so now the government can buy them through data entry. So that's what it's about, freeing up resources. You regulate demand, get your net spending at the right level, too much spending, net inflation, too little, unemployment. Like I said, I'll let you just read that. That's just reiterating the point. Now I'm taking you out of neoliberal framing. And some of us, we're maybe not quite as young as we once were. So we've had like 40, 50 or more years with the wrong model. So this is a big thing, you know, because I'm telling you how the system really works. It's a Copernicus moment. You know, I'm telling you it's not the Earth at the middle of the solar system. It's the sun. The government doesn't fund itself through taxes. It can't, in fact. There's no balance sheet mechanism for that to happen. Can't happen. So it's a wow moment. Now you've got to keep this in your head, because when you go back and you watch the news, you'll see some guys on, oh, well, we're going to run out of money, how we're going to fund it, etc. And you'll be drawn back into the wrong framing. You've got to hold on to this idea. Keep your head when all around are losing theirs. Right, which is a bit like a Roman idea again, I suppose. Right. So, let's get it right. Now the trick is, the problem is that inflation can come from a source other than too much spending. All the inflation pretty much that we've had in my lifetime, or close, has been cost push. It's been not to do with the fact we're so rich that we're buying into them. It's cost push, like the price of oil going up in the 70s, if you're old enough to remember that, food prices, that pushes up prices. Now, the thing is, what you'll find is when I went to the city are absolutely petrified of inflation, for obvious reasons. They're all very rich, they all store their assets in money, so if the value of money falls, they're not very happy. One guy said to me, well, some people have to be unemployed to protect the value of my money. Read right to a book. This is how they think. Now the thing is, inflation at a low rate, single digits, isn't that bad. I mean, I'm not saying we should go for it. Maybe you should aim for 2 or 3% inflation, that's fine. But if, let's say, what happens if you got 5 or 6? Is it a problem for ordinary people? No. Provided your wages go up faster than inflation, and people on fixed incomes, like pensions, go up faster than inflation, it's not a problem. What you do is squeeze the profit share, the non-productive element, the financial sector, all right, the big corporate businesses. So, as provided you squeeze their share of the pie, you got them. And if you bought a house about 1970, when, you know, I don't know what you paid for it, a couple of grand, then you found the real size of your mortgage dwindled very low. Result, who didn't like it? The people who've got all the money they're lending it to, the real value of the repayments have gone down. It's funny, isn't it, how bankers go on about inflation? Or maybe it's not so funny. They know where their interests lie. The difference is ordinary people, we don't necessarily, we panic too much about inflation, all right? Now I'm not saying that you can ignore it and be mischaracterized by that. I'm just saying err on the side of employment, not inflation, all right? That's what should be worrying you. You should be worried about, are we giving all of our community the chance to contribute, all right? And if we get a little bit of inflation, provided wages exceed it, no problem, okay? And that's not the same as just pressing a button and just letting things go. That's deliberate mischaracterization, and that's what the mainstream do in an attempt to ridicule something they see as a threat. Now, I'm just going to use a little example of Copernicus. Copernicus did not publish pretty much till his deathbed. Why? Fear of ridicule. Not persecution, ridicule. Because it's obvious, isn't it, that the sun goes round the earth. The earth doesn't move, it's solid, and you can see the sun going round the earth. Therefore, any complete lunatic who said the sun was at the middle of it is a nutcase. So it's obvious, inverted commas, that the government gets its money through taxes. And anybody that says otherwise must be crazy. Now that's what they try to do with MMT, to start with ignore it and ridicule it. Now they know it's coming and they attack it. There's a lot in the media attacking MMT. I've written a couple of articles to criticise it. And to be fair, it's not really fair, me attacking the mainstream. It really is like shooting fish in a barrel. All right? It's too easy. But I've won, but the problem is they're too thick to realise I've won. That's the problem. You know what I mean? But it's coming. It's a question of when. All right? Now, if you guys go away and you kind of get MMT, don't be boring at dinner parties like me, you know, you want a funny style. Well, I know about the monetary system. Guilty. But I've given you some powerful knowledge there. So we've talked about the deficit. All right? It's great, provided it's not too big. All right? The deficit is only a problem for full employment. It's too large at full employment. Right. And you can try it. if any of you have got a grandson or a granddaughter and you give them £100,000 government bond, are they happy? Or are they sad? I'll tell you what, they're going to be happy. So government debt is an asset. If you've got a pension fund, a lot of money will be invested in that. It's great. So government debt is good, up to a point. And it's that up to a point that's important. Who knows about it? There's Warren. Warren is the Copernicus of economics. He saw the system. All right, don't think, hey, that clever guy told us all about MMT. I might tell you about it, but I didn't see it. Warren saw it. I'm just like several notches down. He's the Copernicus. He saw the system. Now, there are antecedents there. You know, like if you look back in history, you can see people that saw this type of thing, like functional finance with Abel Lerner, if you're interested in economics. So it's not entirely new, but he crystallized it in a modern framework. It's a bit like, if you look at the Copernicus example, some of the ancient Greek astronomers were, there was a guy beginning with an A and I can't remember his name, but he was thinking a little bit along the lines of the sun being at the middle of the solar system many, many years earlier. So, but Warren is the man. Now, what about the government? Firstly, they don't understand monetary operations. Now, as I said, I don't think they do in general, right? A lot of them think we're still under fixed exchange rates. They think like that. Now, under fixed exchange rates, different rules apply. So, maybe they've got an element of that. I won't talk too much about that now. Some people, interestingly enough, naturally think that democracy should be subjugated to markets. Now, this is a philosophical, ideological idea. These people think markets exist like some otherworldly phenomenon, like cosmic energy. And we can't do this because, well, the markets won't like it. And the markets are all powerful, all seeing, all doing wonderful things. Well, a couple of points. One, the markets aren't any of those things. One, and this is crucial, markets are a human construct. They're not a natural phenomenon. If we all left the planet, there would be no markets. They go with us. We make them. We construct them. There is no such thing as a free market. All markets are constructed in favour of the constructor, probably. So the global market, strangely enough, is constructed in favour of the global market players, the big corporations. It's not a free market, it's a construct. And also, this is crucial, the state, the US state, British state, the Eurozone central bank, because their states have ceded monetary power to another entity. They control the spreadsheet and they control the markets, not the other way around. The markets are powerful, and that's just because as a global democracy, if you like, we've given them the power. How do I know? Right, when we had the crisis, did the governments of the world go to big business and ask for the money? No, it's the other way around, isn't it? The businesses who were supposed to be all powerful, which just blown the system, had to go to the central banks who got the spreadsheet. So, for example, in the US, the Fed pressed a few buttons and gave all the banks their money back, which is basically, if you imagine, the banks had a load of assets, toxic assets. On paper, they're maybe worth a couple of trillion. In practice, they can't sell them, not worth anything. So all the central bank does, press a button, gives them $1 trillion worth of US bank reserves, which are basically money, and takes the dodgy stuff off them. All done in a moment. So in other words, that's when, in a crisis, that's where you see where the power lies. Say you're driving along in your car, you don't know how good your brakes are, you probably won't find out. You find out when you're going downhill at 50 miles an hour, you try it out, you find out how good things are in a crisis. Now, the crisis showed where the power lies, and it lies with states. Now, it might be, not me, let's say that you believe markets are efficient and wonderful when left alone. So then you might decide, because they're really efficient, you're going to give them the power. I don't agree with that, but that's a valid argument. All right? But it's not correct to say they hold the power naturally. There's a difference. The other one is governments kind of understand the system and they're all sitting around conspiring. They're not clever enough to do that. You know how, I mean, could you imagine Boris Johnson doing that? I mean, come off it, you know? He doesn't know the way home, never mind doing that. So, that's not what's happening. So, this is the thing, we all face constraints. Now, you're Green Party delegates, you understand this. The government doesn't face monetary constraints, it faces real constraints. So let's look at Britain as for an example. What gives us the ability to deliver a good life for ourselves is not the government spreadsheet and its spending power, it's us, our people, their motivation, their skills, their technological capacity, okay? Our roads and infrastructure, our education system. Things that are intangible, like goodwill, humanity, intuition, love, dare I say. These are real resources, and these are what will determine our capacity. Now, obviously, the government's actions are very important, because when the government spends, it takes a resource from one thing to another. So, if the government decided we needed 50,000 more nurses, it would have to train them, wouldn't it? That takes some time. And the loss to the nation would not be the money the government's keyed in to employ the nurses, it would be what those 50,000 nurses could have done. They could have been bank clerks, couldn't they? Or they could have been estate agents. And that's what we've lost. Now, if you've got unemployment and you give someone a job that wants a job, wants to contribute maybe to cleaning up the environment or looking after old people or something, there's no loss at all because they weren't doing anything. There's no cost. If we were on a desert island and this half were all working, you know, catching fish and building shelters, and the other half weren't doing anything, and you were bored and wanted to contribute, and I said, well, I haven't got enough little couple of pebbles to employ you, and you'd think you're a bit crazy. Now if I said, no, I'm going to bring you into it, we'd be assuming you're equally productive. We'd be twice as productive, wouldn't we? So in other words, that's what we have to do. We have to, if you like, live up to our means and use our resources efficiently. And this takes a new vision, new thinking. Right, now one of the core ways of doing that is a job guarantee. Now what a job guarantee is, it's anyone who is unemployed. Now, to be unemployed, you are defined as unemployed but ready and willing to work. All right, so people who aren't willing or able to work are not unemployed, despite what the Daily Express tells you. They're outside, they don't count as unemployed, they're not in the working population. Now, I'll talk about that class of person in a moment, but in terms of this, so if you're ready and willing and eager to contribute, you shouldn't be denied the right to work. It is not work fair and not compulsory. So in other words, the government would offer every unemployed person the chance to work in a huge range of jobs. Environmentally friendly jobs, of course. Hey, Green Conference. So unemployment automatically falls to zero because anyone not in it isn't ready and willing to work. Now, what's the advantage of a job guarantee? Well, it means that you put a floor on wages and conditions as a proper job. Say you were a youngish person, you want to work full-time, 9 to 5, you get a 9 to 5 job, you get holidays, and you can get the sack. All right, then you'd have to have a time off and get a bit of training and go and do another one. And that means the private sector, the private sector can operate. All they have to do is bid you out of the job guarantee pool, give you a better offer. And you set the rules then so that private sector can operate, that's fine. You know, if you've got a great business idea, a great green business idea, you want to employ people, you just have to give them a better deal than the job guarantee. And if you're an efficient company, you can do it. And if a company says, well, I can't afford to pay my workers a living wage and still make a profit, hey, bad news, exit the industry. I can't afford to produce a good product without damaging the environment, exit the industry. You know, you've got to be tough. Life's tough. If the other hand says, well, I'm going to give my workers better than the job guarantee and I'm going to give them better holidays and better training, well, fantastic. So no one's ever unemployed. Everyone can contribute and get paid for doing it. No one's wasted. And the beauty of it is, it gives you a price anchor for inflation. Because let's say, for example, you were an unemployed bricklayer in a slump. All right, you go to the job guarantee. The job guarantee gives you a job guarantee wage to build housing, green housing, for those people who are socially disadvantaged. And then, of course, you're doing that, then the economy booms, and you could be bid out of that. But you've got the skills. You weren't an unemployed bricklayer for 20 years and lost the skills. You're still getting it. So in other words, you don't get a thing where in a boom, there's a shortage of skilled workers, so that bigs the wage rate up as the inflation rate. So it's a natural inflation anchor. And that's where MMT is better on inflation than the tradition. This is the irony. MMT's got a better anti-inflationary policy than the Bank of England. The Bank of England's anti-inflationary policy has failed all the time. I showed you how it failed. I could show you the graph for inflation. It failed every time. MMT's got a price anchor through the job guarantee, which makes it better at inflation. So MMT's better at everything. It's better in counter-inflationary policy. It's better at maintaining full employment. It's greener. It gives people more chances. So based on every criterion you might use, bang, we knock the mainstream way out of the park. It's a bit like Copernicus. He beats the Ptolemaic astronomers every time. So that's your job guarantee. Final slide. I'm going to talk about, I just made this up. Somebody else might have thought of it, but hey, I'm going to claim it for now. A new triple entente, and I put it in green in honour of the Green Conference. All right, I'm arguing that MMT informed fiscal policy. Now, you can't implement MMT. MMT just describes the way the system is. All right, Copernicus didn't say we ought to have the sun at the middle of the solar system. We're going to tow it there. He didn't say that. He said it is like that. So I'm saying the government does spend by data entry. Taxes do destroy previous government spending. It's not like a recommendation. It's just the way it is. But once you understand that, then you can develop a policy. Right, so we need a Green New Deal, okay? And we need a job guarantee. They all go together. A triple entente, all right? Right, this is the problem with the Green New Deal. If you say, right, I don't know the exact figures, but I read a paper saying in the US, if you use conventional framing, right to the first slide, it's a long time ago. The cost of the Green New Deal in America might be like $90 trillion. Well, it's so expensive, never going to get going. So if you want, as Green Party members, you want a Green New Deal, and they might say, I don't know what it would cost in Britain, I haven't studied it, I'm going to pick a figure, could be entirely wrong. Let's say, sorry?
1.6 trillion.
Right, so 1.6 trillion. So that's like the size of the entire GDP of the nation, all right? Are you got any chance whatsoever of getting off the ground? No. If you frame it like this, when you say, the question is, you want a Green New Deal, forget all that, have we got the resources to do it? In other words, have we got the technology to become carbon neutral? Have we got the people we need and the skills we need to do it? If we have, then we can do it. If we haven't, then we might have to start thinking about training people and trying to get some new technology. But what constrains the UK and indeed any country from having a proper Green New Deal is not money. It's the real resources that we possess as a nation and the willingness, of course, to use them. So go back to my desert island example. All right, if say we were destroying the island, and then let's say I was your leader, not the delusions of power, but let's say I was, and then I said, well, we all sat down one day by the campfire, so we're destroying this island, we're going to make it a green island. What would decide our ability to do that? Would you agree? Wouldn't be how many little coloured pebbles I'd got to pay you. Is have we got the skills and the ingenuity and the willingness, yeah, to actually do it? If we have, we could. If we didn't know how to do it, so well, I can't really work how we're going to keep ourselves warm without burning all this coal that is on the beach since the tanker crashed or something. You know what I mean? It's a real thing. So I'm not, and this is the crucial thing about MMT. It is not saying you can do what you like. You've heard me say that several times. If you see it on it's not about pressing a button. We've got constraints. We all have. They're just not the ones that they say. The gentleman there that gave me the figure, what was your name? Sorry. Chris gave me the figure 1.3 trillion. What I'm saying is that isn't the worry, because the government's got the spreadsheet. The worry is, have we got the real resources to do what we want to do? That concludes my talk. Any questions?
I was almost a founder member of the Green Party, which was, done all the meadows in limits to growth has foreseen the crisis, which is now, nothing's been done, well not enough has been done, and it's now urgent, so I've joined XR, Extinction Rebellion.
Right.
Now, I've been struggling with what you've been trying to say ever since there was I don't know if you know, you probably don't know Brian Wesley, but he's talking much along your lines all the time. I was a sceptic. Now, you have actually managed to explain it far clearer than Brian ever did. And I am coming round to see that what you're saying is absolutely necessary as a part. You know, I mean, the analogy is the sun and the sun, which is the centre of the earth. However, you spoiled it all by the end of the Green New Deal. Now, you obviously have this idea that everybody has jobs. Now, I don't know how many people here know, sorry if I'm going on, I need to explain what I'm saying. I don't know how many of you remember Richard Wilkinson, who recently co-authored The Spirit Level with Kate Pickett. Yeah. Now, I read an earlier book of him called Poverty in Progress, and the thesis was that economic growth was not a good idea. It was actually the escape route from ecological pressures. Now, I'm sorry, but you have not mentioned growth anywhere. Your system has got to apply, but I was rather surprised at no stage have you explained. You see, I joined XR and started blocking roads and things like that because there is an urgent problem that we are wrecking the ecosphere.
Well, I can answer you.
No, the thing is, what I would say is that what Richard Wilkinson explained was a tribe in New Guinea which hadn't invented money, which introduced the principle that they had a strict division between what was necessary and what wasn't necessary. What was necessary, you shared unconditionally. What wasn't necessary was the result of was available for silly status games, and your status depended on how well you did. Now, I looked at this and sort of thought, well, we can adopt this strategy to a modern society. Basic income.
Right,
I would like to see that please integrate.
Just to give somebody else a chance to
I will talk to you afterwards, and I want you to talk about growth and talk about the basic income and integrating view, because I'm coming around to your view of thinking.
Okay, thank you, John. Right, okay, firstly, I'd like to thank you, because when I got a round of applause and from yourselves, and that's very kind, and I never got anything from the city. Silence. And then the chair said, would anyone like to say anything in defence of Phil? And no one. And one guy was going to say he was a bit slow getting in, and there's a guy called Charles Goodhart, and he is a very, very famous monetary economist, and he understands MMT. Now, to answer your question, the problem, what was your name again, sorry?
Clive.
Clive, right, Clive. The problem you've got, not to be critical, is you've not reframed the concept of a job. When you said everyone's got to have a job, I never said that. What I said was everyone should have the opportunity to do a job. Right, I never mentioned growth, because I'm not talking about these jobs necessarily being to do with conventional economic growth. A job might be, let's say that you want a job guarantee, all right? Let's say that you were about 25 and you got a family, you need some money, so you go and you want a job guaranteed job. You say, right, what I want you to do is go and clean up the ocean. You go on the beach and you collect the stuff. Or I want you to go to talk to an old person. Not care, that's a paid job. You sit with an older person, you talk to them, you play music to people who've got mental disabilities. In fact, you might be caring for an elderly relative anyway, and you get paid for doing that. So I will turn the question back to you and say, it's because you haven't yet redefined work. You've got to realise my definition of work is not necessarily growth in a conventional sense, nor is it environmentally damaging. Second point, basic income. Right, okay, here's the first point. The universal basic income is clearly ridiculous. Why would you give Alan Sugar 12 grand a year? Stupid. So eliminate that. Basic income's good, but it's not as good as job guarantee. Here's why. Right. We all innately, we want to contribute. Let's go back to my desert island example. You guys ain't doing anything. You might think it's nice having a couple hours in the sun, but they're doing the work. It's human nature. We want to get involved. You guys are all here at 9 o'clock in the morning. So the job guarantee gives everyone, and listen carefully to this, ready, willing and able to work. What about the people who are not able to work? They might be ill. They might be looking after a family. They might want to be a radical artist and keep a check on the rest of us. They might want to be a dissident. All right? They might have private means. What do we do with people who are ready enough? They get a basic income which is good enough to live with dignity. So we eliminate poverty. So we do have a basic income, but it's not a replacement for the job guarantee. It's a complement to it. Now people argue, oh well, the universal basic income is better than the job guarantee. But the reason they think about that is they kind of get the idea that somehow, say you were Alan Sugar, you would be paying more in tax to pay for the universal basic income. So in other words, you might pay 800 grand in tax and get 12 grand back, so you net 88,000 down. So it's just like a redistribution. But the whole construct is wrong. As I've said, the government doesn't need Alan Sugar's money. So if he leaves the country, the only loss we have is him. So you might say, well, he is no loss, all right? Because he thinks he understands economics, but he doesn't, all right? He doesn't even understand the tax system he criticises. When he said, oh, well, you know, if you have a 70% tax rate and I earn 100,000, that means I'll be giving 70,000 in. It doesn't work like that. You know, you've got tax-free allowances, Alan. So, in other words, if all these top businesses leave the country, there is no loss. So, you see what I mean? So, Clive, I hope I've answered your question, all right? I will talk to you afterwards if you want to have a real go at me. I'm a teacher. I've had bottom set year 9 Friday afternoon. I'm used to a hard time. Right, next question.
Hi. Phil, you gently ridiculed politicians Hammond, Osborne and now Johnson for being too thick to understand how economics works.
Yeah.
Is it not a possibility that they're actually a bit sharper than that and just being dishonest with this and pretending to be dumb to string everyone along?
Well, what I would say to that is, a lot of it is only humour. And it's quite difficult to know exactly how much politicians know and how much they don't know. Now, if you're asking my opinion on that, my gut feeling is, from what I've seen, is they know a bit, but not enough to really understand, and they're too frightened to go any further. And I know Sarah actually knows a bit more than me, because she knows John McDonnell, I think, and one or two other politicians.
Met John McDonnell,
yeah, so I don't know if you want to...
We've met John McDonnell, and some of the MMT economists have met with John McDonnell. Their problem is, we're asking politicians, because we've had 40 years of neoliberal framing, we're asking politicians who are vulnerable to the voters in their constituents to do all the heavy lifting. You're asking them to get up and say, actually, the space the government has is much bigger than we thought. Taxes aren't necessarily essential for us to deliver our goals. We need them to moderate inflation, but we can achieve these goals. They'll be hauled over the coals. So we are expecting them to do the heavy lifting, accept that modern monetary theory is how the system works, come and vote for me. Politicians are not leaders, they're followers. If you get it, they'll get it. If John McDonnell gets up here and says, I'm going to save the NHS, I'm going to give you all a job, and I'm going to get the money from the Cayman Islands to do it, we all cheer. We love to hear that, because we think there's enough money for a start in the Cayman Islands to deliver the NHS, and when we know that there isn't, very unlikely that there's enough money in the Cayman Islands to deliver all of our spending needs. But it feels good. It feels good. The trouble is that privilege is those rich people who sit there smugly thinking, see, you need my money, don't you? You need us to be rich. And modern monetary theory allows us the liberty of saying, actually, we don't need you. And as Stephanie Kelton says, it makes the rich irrelevant. We don't need their tax money. We can deliver using public money for public purpose. And so John McDonnell can stop talking about the Cayman Islands when enough of us have gone to the trouble of learning a little bit about how the monetary system works and how modern monetary systems work. And that will happen as our children, our grandchildren are brought into these ideas, and that the neoliberal framing, the failed neoliberal framing, disappears, as it will over time, and we'll go back to the time when our parents and your parents understood that the government stood as the bank to fund all our public good, our public services. That's how we knew we would be able to fund the NHS and to build social housing. We knew that once upon a time, and what Warren has done is to rediscover it and present it in a way which is modern.
Can I just add something?
Prue.
Oh, so I was just going to add something.
Yeah, just because we're saying that we don't necessarily need the tax money to pay for the things, doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't tax the rich heavily anyway. Yeah,
That's distribution.
that's about equity and fairness. I think some of what John McDonnell feels is that if we say we don't need to tax the rich, then people won't tax the rich, and they will still have all these resources. But so it's about taking their power away, and we can do that by...
It's much healthier for our democracy. And also, as you all know, having a lot of money gives you access to real resources. So the very, very rich people who will have a claim on our natural resources, and to whom their access to democracy is much greater than ours. So those are reasons for reducing inequality, but it's not because we need their money to deliver the goals that we all hold as being really important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that presentation, sir. Steve Martin, Derbyshire Green Party.
Yeah.
I would like to take up your message around education and learning for this new approach to the economy. Indeed, you probably recognize that that happened in 2012. The whole of the economics student population walked out of their economics classes. They weren't actually working in real time and what was happening in terms of the economy in America. And in 2012, the University of Manchester, the post-crash society in the economics department, also walked out of their lectures because they weren't actually. But the problem is, this is our university system that isn't fit for purpose in the 21st century, and I'm arguing this, and I have been arguing this for at least 2 decades, even though I'm a professor in the university sector, that we aren't actually preparing people for this more sustainable future that we all aspire to. Now, we have to do something, because the universities are part of the problem and part of the solution. And yet, at this conference, I haven't heard much about that at all in terms of our education system. And I am disappointed. Let me just say that 87% of our current parliamentarians came through a university education. And what have we got the last 3 years? Chaos. Nothing really has happened. Please, can we get this onto the policy agenda in a much more profound way than we have to date?
Right. First of all, I might just say it's a great question, and in a way, my thesis that I'm doing in old age is really related a lot to how can we address the problem you're saying. Now, first thing is, I think it's an old David Bowie song, It Ain't Easy. Now, if you're in the university sector, you know, and there's an old thing, it's hard to get someone to do what their salary suggests otherwise. And so, in economics, there's a huge lack of academic freedom. You know, there's a one-size-fits-all. The only way you can get anything published in the top journals, etc., is, you know, neoliberal type economics, you know, highly mathematized, etc. So it's hard to do it. However, movements, I take the point, there is an MMT university, okay, it's coming, all right, and Sarah knows more about that than me. There's a textbook, first run, sold out. It's a university textbook. There's a thing called Promoting Economic Pluralism. It's run by a guy called Henry Leveson Gower. It's the same name as an old Test cricketer. So he's involved. So there's lots of organisations trying to promote pluralism in economics, trying to bring MMT into universities, get people to understand it. Now, the difficulty lies is that if you imagine, I use the example of Star Wars quite a lot. You've got the Death Star. Now the Death Star, if you see Star Wars, it's one big black beast. Now that is neoliberal economics. All the top professors, top universities, they're all in the Death Star. The problem is the rebels are quite a disparate bunch. So you might get, for example, MMT, who support the job guarantee, then there's the UBI people, there's the Marxists and various shades of Marxists, and you've got people who are very green and that's all they think about the environment, then you've got the institutionalists, the Sraffians, and then you name it, there's a lot of rebel groups. Now the logical thing is, of course, shouldn't we have, going back to the Star Wars, what we need is some form of rebel alliance? You know, can't we get positive money, the Greens, the Sraffians, who sound a bit like people from another planet. There are people who are not economists. There is a group called the Sraffians or the Neo-Ricardians. Can we get all these guys together to have one big massive assault on the Death Star? Now the problem is, it's not easy to link these guys because a lot of them operate in their own world. I'm right. So the way I'm going to attack the Death Star is the only way to do it. So my argument would be you need to promote pluralism, and that's why an MMT, certainly myself, I'm a pluralist thinker, you know, my PhD supervisor's a Marxist, all right, so that's fine. I'm not Marxist, but he is. We get on well. I like post-Keynesians, you know, my great hero is Jeff Harcourt, he's not an MMT, he's a post-Keynesian. But we all have that thing in common. We want to make the world a better place. So it will take, you know, radicals or from different sorts to think in a different way. And there are people even in the mainstream, on the fringes of the mainstream, who I don't agree with the way they but they have got like a good heart in them maybe. You know, there's people out there, like Joel Stiglitz, for example. He said some good things, he's mainstream. So we have to do it, and you're absolutely right, and education is the key. It's hard to get old people to change their minds, they're embedded, you know. If you tell somebody who's like, you know, something like my dad was wedded to his ideas, if I told him all this, he would just think I was crazy, because it's an insult. You know, he's known the taxes fund spending for 60 years, and who am I to tell him otherwise? And there are old people, particularly, and some young ones, who will take offence. So it's difficult, but everything you say I absolutely agree with, and we do need to promote pluralism, and I think, and we do need to promote better education. I don't know if Sarah would like to add something on that.
Warren and Bill and some of the core MMTs have put together, mostly Bill Mitchell has put together a textbook which is for undergraduate level study at university in economics. And there are moves to produce a book of a 150-page type book, which would go to all students, probably at A level and beyond, who broad spectrum study across humanities, sociology, criminology, social sciences, and even some of the practical subjects like policing and social care and all these things. So back in the day when you went and studied these subjects, and probably some of you might have done it then when you went to university, you've done a module in political economy. How does the economy work? How does our government fund and how do we deliver our public services? They took that deliberately out of the curriculum years ago. And so people nowadays can study to a very advanced level and not have the faintest idea how our money is created, how our public services are funded. And so that is how they've managed to get away with it. So Bill Mitchell has written a textbook, it's about that thick and it's quite difficult to read. It's called Macroeconomics. We've got a website which we have attempted, this was always our goal, because we're non-economists. We've read a lot of modern monetary theory, it's quite difficult, and it's quite some difficult mathematics in it, a lot of equations and heavy duty stuff, isn't there? But we've tried in our website to interpret it into lay terms, for lay people to understand. And once they grasp some of the basic concepts, then they can go on and do some more study. But if you buy a copy of Macroeconomics, in there is reference to something called MMT Ed. MMT Ed will be an online, free to anyone who wants to sign up, university. It goes up from kindergarten, it will be kindergarten to postgraduate level, where macroeconomics and the language that we use around and framing that we use around our economy and our monetary system will be there for all of us to learn. And eventually these ideas will be adopted and they'll come into mainstream thinking. In Italy, where they're ahead of the game, there are groups like us all over Italy, and they go into schools, about 1,000 schools they've been into, and they teach this to small children, and they work through school-age kids up to secondary school level. And so it's a common understanding, and they are currency users, as we all know. We know that Italy don't issue their own currency, but they're getting their population to understand what is affordable and what is not affordable. And you're absolutely right, it has to be done through education, and that is our goal. GIMMS is an educational outfit.
Chris Badley, Lincoln Party. The talk of promising everybody a job sounds to me like an enormous leap over a chasm, and I don't know what comes in between, because it conjures up at its worst a huge bureaucracy of civil servants, where junior civil servants are given quotas of jobs they've got to create, and they're going to be creating lots of non-existent jobs, or just jobs that actually aren't ones at all. What's wrong with simply wherever we get the money from, if we've got this money to spend, I've just spent a government spending it on the green infrastructure in the conventional way, of just ordering projects or giving grants and subsidies and incentives, and let the market create those jobs.
Okay, well, sorry, sir. If you think about it, let's say you're right. So the government just spends the money it's got on green projects. All the people that want to work. There isn't a job guarantee. It doesn't exist because all the people are doing what you're doing. Now, if you're wrong, and if the government does all the things that it wants to do, and you've still got people who want to work that can't, then you have a job guarantee. So in a sense...
But how do you deliver that guarantee?
Well, how do you deliver it? Well, I'll let Sarah talk about that, because...
How do you deliver it? Well, we deliver it already. We deliver unemployment benefits across the spectrum, and they're generally... The government sets that level of unemployment as it being necessary to control inflation. What it doesn't understand is that the costs of unemployment far outweigh any cost to the economy of inflation, because the costs of unemployment, of having people not doing anything who want to do something, and this may include disabled people. We give disabled the right to access education up to the age of 18, and when they get to 18 we say, sorry, you're on your own. Now, we have a right, under conventions that we signed up to at the end of the war, to provide everybody with a job and a home and access to food. And to do that, they need to have our currency. So you have to provide them with good quality, good level benefits to those people that can't work, and work to those people that are willing and able. Because there's always things that can be done. We're never going to run out of jobs. And when people say the robots are coming, and there won't be anything for any of us to do, you can look around. If you drove here from the middle of Newport, every time you walk around in your communities, you can see jobs that need doing. And you can see work that is already being done but it is not being recognised as employment. I'm a carer, Claire's a carer, so you can...
There's a difference between increasing the amount of employment that's available in the world and letting people find those jobs, and saying to somebody who hasn't got a job, we will give you this job, even though you haven't,
can be done,
and even though we haven't got one.
You can find those jobs.
Well, how?
Well, look, you see, the problem with this is, going back to my other, you're framing, if I may say so, is wrong. What you're saying is, right, okay, the private sector provides jobs, you go and look for one. If you don't find one and you want to contribute, tough luck. Now what I'm saying is the state has to provide you with one. Now your solution isn't the solution. You're just saying, I don't think your solution is very good. My solution is do nothing.
My answer is to increase the available jobs.
Right, but as I said, if you, look, okay, go back a bit, relax, right, go back a bit, right. What I'm saying to you is it's a buffer stock. So if you keep pumping more money into the system and doing what you want to do, all right, you wouldn't need to give people a job guarantee anyway. So what you're really saying is, right, if you want to walk across on a tightrope walk, 400 feet in the air, do you want a safety net or not? Now, you're saying, well, we'll just walk across and trust that we've got when we spend money on all our green things, we're going to get exactly right, and there won't be anybody that wants to work who hasn't got a job, and it would be too complicated, apparently, to find them that job. So I'm not going to have a safety net. I say no.
It's not a job, it's unemployment.
All right, so what you're going to say then is anybody who doesn't find a job on the green expansion is just given unemployment benefits, even though they want to find a job. My answer is, I don't agree with that. I mean, I get your question, and the question, in a way, I think we have answered your question. You just don't agree with us. I mean, the question is, it is not that administratively difficult to run the job guarantee.
You can call it a job guarantee, but Warren calls it a transition job, and that's really a question of semantics, really. He calls it how people transition between the private sector at full employment and being not available for the private sector. And it's how do you keep, he calls it a buffer stock of people, like a buffer stock of butter. How do you stop that butter from becoming rancid? You keep it active. You keep people up and doing things and moving around. And so it's counter-cyclical. So when the economy is at full employment and we're all busy achieving all of our goals, then naturally the pool of available workers would naturally go down, because they're all busy, like you aim to achieve in the private sector. It's not about expanding the public sector necessarily. We decide how big you want your public sector at the beginning. How many nurses do you want? What size classes do we want our children to have? These are roles which we can create within our society, which the government can recognise as work, and then we can provide training and we can provide benefits, and that may make people want to step into private sector employment. You could sign up as a national carer service. We could start a national carer service. Everyone who's at home looking after a child or a disabled person could sign up for the national carer service. You'd be entitled to a minimum wage. Say, let's say it's 20 grand a year. Let's say you get 2 weeks holiday a year, because why should people looking after disabled people have to do it every single day and every single hour of every year? They're entitled to a break. It enables us to support those people who are already doing work, and their institutions are already set up to monitor and implement that, and we could maybe improve on those. We could use it as a way to deliver some support to social care and develop the roles of health professionals that used to exist, public health and health prevention system, illness prevention systems. So it's about rethinking work, using our imagination and educating ourselves away from this toxic mess that we've got into about thinking that jobs and unemployment, job or unemployment, or some handout that is barely livable. We have an income that is so low that it forces the population into seeking
could I just mention
vulnerable
basic
work.
income would actually facilitate, lubricate all this discussion.
No, but it wouldn't, because it wouldn't give people dignity of work.
Yes. There's a lot of studies. There's been a lot of studies done on the value of work. And when they trialled in Argentina at the start of the financial crisis, this is where one job guarantee was tried. It's not new. We had job guarantees going back centuries, where the government's hired workers during crisis to provide them with work, doing public purpose work. In Argentina, they had a scheme, a job guarantee scheme at the start of the financial crisis, and within 6 months, they created 750,000 jobs to head of households. And it saved millions of families from destitution. And within 18 months, it was over 1.5 million jobs that have been created, funded by the government, in their communities, doing public purpose work that those communities decided that needed to be done. And it was, they didn't sit around and think, oh, we haven't got the infrastructure, how are we going to organise it? Their communities know what needs doing. You ask any GP, you ask any head teacher, you ask any of your community groups that work on improving the environment. If we could have more people, we could get so much more done. We could help more people if we had the resources to make these things happen. Communities know what needs happening, and it's just a means of injecting that government money in at the bottom where it needs to be to get our communities going.
I might just make one little point, I'll take the question, sorry, just to summarise, because it keeps coming back, that cork. This UBI basic income versus a job guarantee keeps coming back, you know. The thing is, a job which is paid, that you've chosen to do, which gives you an opportunity to contribute, is very important. You get your social networks, you keep your skills, your self-worth. A job is a very, very important thing that you're paid directly for doing it. My daughter, for example, she took 2 years off from university. She does 2 days a week of voluntary work, which is fantastic. But she also does 1 day a week of paid work. And she's got, someone's paying me for what I'm doing. And this is a very valuable thing. Now, a basic income, we need a basic income for people who are unwilling or unable to work. Yeah, it's dignity. But if you just give everybody some money who doesn't work, all of those other good things aren't there. And the thing you've got to realise is it's not compulsory. Now, you might wave your hands clap and accept that, but again, I would say you're a victim of you haven't realised in my opinion, how we're defining job. I'll talk to you later, Nora. Sorry, the lady there had a question.
Last question, and I think if anybody, obviously you've got other fringe events to go to, so if anybody has a question and hasn't been able to pose their question, we'll be in the room at the end till, I don't know, probably later on this afternoon. So do come along and we'll ask them for you.
Which room did you say?
The room next door.
The food next door. Well, it's the food, yes.
So I know everyone's just about to leave, so I'll be really quick. I would just like to point out that besides the 3 wonderful women who've been running this event, I'm the first woman to have spoken. And I think that men do think that economics is their thing. And I do think there are plenty of really good female economists out there, and just to say that all of the people you quoted were male as well. So I would recommend Mariana Mazzucato. You may have read her book, The Value of Everything. I think it's really complementary to this, and I think that understanding how we value things, what the value is, that particularly relates to unpaid care work and household work, which you've been referring to. And it means that you can, and which is worth about 30 to 70% of GDP, depending on what country you're in and how you calculate it, of course. And I would say that I kind of feel like you're all in agreement. I think we need private sector, you know, support, and has conditions, which means that people with disabilities and all sorts of differences are able to be employed if they want to be employed, under support to private sector in the green economy, and at the same time have a complementary approach. So the conversation I'm listening to, I feel like you all have space within this approach, and it's not contradictory. And just finally to say, I work in a lot of countries where they're still striving for growth, and one of the biggest problems is underinvestment by public sector and underinvestment in public services. And that concept that someone brought up earlier on of when do we know we've got just enough to be necessary, and I think that's really important to bring in here. When is growth enough? Because there are lots of countries where public investment is needed in order to reach that just enough. And I think that we export our economic policies to countries that are just so different from ours, and we really need to be mindful of that, and this pluralistic approach, I would fully support it. Thank you very much.